He left me at a nursing home without goodbye, then forged my name and sold my life. They called it concern. I called it what it was, erasure. But I didn't vanish. I rebuilt. Now I own the building he lives in. And this time, he answers to me. Celeste Whitman sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her hands folded neatly in her lap, as Griffin's car rolled to a slow stop in front of the Marigold residential home. The silence between them wasn't new, but this time it was cement. He didn't look at her, didn't say a word. The radio was off. The air conditioning hummed, a mechanical breath in place of conversation. Through the windshield, Celeste saw the bland facade of the facility. Neutral beige walls, two clean windows, artificial marigolds planted in rigid symmetry. She didn't recognize this place. There had been no discussion, no warning, just a drive and now apparently a destination. Griffin stepped out and circled the car, opened the trunk, retrieved her single suitcase, the one with the broken zipper she used to take to painting retreats. He didn't open her door. He didn't ask if she needed help. She opened it herself. The sky was overcast, the sidewalk slick from an earlier rain. Celeste stepped out slowly, scanning his face for softness. Something. But his eyes were fixed forward. "We're here," he said. "Here?" she echoed. He handed her the suitcase. "Your room's ready. Everything's arranged." "Griffin, I don't understand." But he was already stepping back into the car. "Wait, can we talk?" The door closed, the engine started, and just like that, he was gone. Celeste stood on the curb, suitcase in hand, feeling like she'd just been pushed off a ledge in a dream, free-falling with no bottom. Inside, the facility smelled of lemon disinfectant and reheated food. A nurse with a clipboard smiled without warmth and led her to room 204. As the door clicked shut behind her, final and sharp, Celeste felt something collapse inward. "Another one," a gravelly voice muttered. She turned. A frail woman with frizzled gray hair sat on the far bed, legs crossed, TV remote in hand. "You the dumped kind or the demented kind?" Celeste blinked. "Excuse me." "I'm Nora," the woman said, not unkindly. "Most of us are one or the other." Celeste placed her suitcase on the bed and sat beside it. Her throat was dry. Her fingers ached. "My son, you brought me here." Nora snorted. "They all say that. Sons, daughters, they bring you like leftovers, drop you off, let someone else deal with what they call concern." Her voice cut through Celeste's daze. Concern. That's the word Griffin had started using more often in recent months. "Mom, I'm concerned about you forgetting things. Concerned about you being alone so much. Concerned about the fire alarm going off." She hadn't burned anything, she was sure. The smoke detector was just old. Or maybe the batteries. He replaced them without asking. Like she was a faulty appliance. She used to be an artist. She painted emotion in color. Grief in indigo, joy in sweeping golds, storms in bleeding crimson. Her studio was a sacred space, a converted garage, smelling of turpentine and rain. Griffin used to play there as a child. He would lie under her easel, tracing shadows. He used to bring her flowers after every show. Wildflowers, dandelions once with the roots still attached. "Because they're stubborn," he'd said. But the Griffin of the last year wasn't that boy. He came to her house on Thursdays, brought groceries, tidy, polite conversations, but always with a clipboard mind, always evaluating. "Did you eat this week? Have you been taking your medication?" "I found the kettle on, again." She didn't remember leaving it on, not truly, maybe, but hadn't he done that once too? When he was 15, hadn't she come home to scorched water and smoke? He had blamed the cat. That memory flickered, then vanished. She unpacked slowly, sweaters, sketch pads, a framed photo of Griffin at 6, beaming and paint splattered. She placed it on the nightstand. It looked like it belonged to someone else now. Nora glanced over. They always start with photos, like proof they mattered to someone once. Celeste turned away. That night, the lights dimmed automatically at 9. Nora snored with the rhythm of a storm tide. Celeste lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She remembered Griffin's 16th birthday. He had come home smelling like weed, eyes bloodshot. She hadn't yelled. She made hot chocolate, sat with him. You think everything can be fixed with cocoa? He'd snapped. Maybe she did. The next morning, a nurse entered with pills. Your son authorized a mild stabilizer, said you've been having episodes. Celeste's mouth went dry. I haven't. He seemed sure. She swallowed the pills anyway. Later, in the courtyard, she found a patch of sun, a pencil, a scrap of newspaper. Her fingers moved before her mind caught up, sketching Griffin's childhood eyes. Bright, curious. She had raised him to be gentle, thought love could grow strong enough to hold back resentment. She had mistaken obedience for trust. He had nodded at her stories, smiled at her memories. But beneath it, he had been cataloging her decline. How did love become something to manage? How long has it been since he called? Nora asked one afternoon. A week. Give it another. He'll convince himself this place is best, that leaving you was mercy. Celeste didn't respond. She stared at the marigolds through the window. Plastic, dusted weekly, never needing sun. She used to paint storms. Now she lived inside one, and no one noticed the color bleeding from the edges. Celeste Whitman had been at Millridge Care for 22 days, not that anyone kept count except her. The calendar pinned above her bed had small pencil slashes on each square, a quiet defiance. Her roommate, Nora, said it didn't matter. Time means jack in this place, she'd muttered on day 3. You die when they forget to feed you, or when your name falls off the meds chart. Mornings at Millridge started not with sunlight, but fluorescent hums and the slow clink of plastic wheels. Tina, the young nurse with warm brown eyes, would knock lightly and peek in. Good morning, sunshine, she'd say, though Celeste rarely responded. Still, Tina smiled, placed the pills beside a paper cup of lukewarm water, and opened the window an inch, letting in a sliver of breath that smelled like damp grass and diesel fumes. Nora remained buried under her quilt, groaning. Let the rot set in. What's left to preserve? By breakfast, the hallway echoed with coughs, footsteps, and someone's old transistor radio. The wallpaper curled at the corners like it too wanted to leave. Ceiling panels sagged with moisture. Time, like the residents, wasn't treated kindly here. At the dining room, Celeste sat beside Louise Brammer, an ex-school principal who corrected nurses' grammar under her breath and wrote imaginary letters to the education board. You know, Louise said one morning, stabbing at her congealed oatmeal, I spent 40 years shaping young minds, and now I get Jell-O cups and crayons like I'm 6. Celeste offered a small nod. Louise took it as agreement. I once suspended a boy for throwing a chair. He came back with his mother the next day. You know what she said? Boys will be boys. As if destruction was a rite of passage. That phrase clawed into Celeste. Boys will be boys, the same defense Griffin's counselor once gave her. The first time he broke a lamp in a rage, she'd excused it. The second time, she bought new bulbs and blamed herself. Hadn't she always made excuses? Back in her room, Celeste sat by the window. Her sketchbook lay beneath her mattress, a makeshift journal in lines and symbols. She hadn't painted in years, but the graphite whispered like old friends. She drew silently. Nora's twisted fingers, Tina's soft eyes, the ceiling crack that looked like a bird in flight. She called it almost freedom. Millridge ran on silence, the kind that wasn't peace but absence. Conversations were hushed, laughter rare. Instead, there were mumbles of confusion, alarms, the occasional outburst quickly sedated. Celeste watched it all, documented the quiet rage in small sketches, tiny truths smuggled out on paper. That afternoon in the corridor, she overheard 2 aides speaking behind the linen cart. That's her, right? One whispered. Room 204? The artist? No, the woman whose son forged her consent papers, had her committed without a real eval. Celeste stopped walking. Her heart thudded in her ears. Yeah, the other aide said. Apparently she was lucid, just inconvenient. They turned and noticed her. One flushed and hurried off. The other gave a pitying glance and pushed the cart away. She stood frozen, her hand tightening on her walker. The hallway seemed to breathe. Walls too close, floor too far. Forged? In her room, she didn't speak, didn't draw, just stared at the peeling edge of the wallpaper by the door, where a tiny vine pattern curled into nothing. Later that night, she asked Nora, Do you ever think you were lied to? Nora scoffed. Only every day since I turned 50. I mean, by your own blood, your child. Of course. My daughter said she'd visit every weekend. That was in 2017 silence. Celeste whispered, he said he was worried, that he just wanted me safe. Translation? Nora said, you were making him uncomfortable. It hit like a slap. Celeste had always prided herself on being the caretaker, the giver. She'd cleaned paint off Griffin's shoes, stayed up all night during his exams, forgave every slight. When she stopped making sense to him, she stopped having worth. Louise joined them that evening for TV hour. You know what no one tells you? She said, eyes fixed on the screen. Women aren't allowed to outlive their usefulness. The second we stop giving, our time, our bodies, our forgiveness, we become burdens. Celeste watched the television flicker over their faces. Nora nodded slowly. You stop being a person. Start being a file. In her sketchbook that night, Celeste didn't draw portraits. She wrote a single sentence in the margins. My love was not a liability. The next day, Tina brought her tea. Not the facility's usual decaf sludge, but chamomile in a chipped ceramic mug. You looked like you needed something real, Tina whispered. Celeste cupped the mug with both hands. The warmth surprised her. So did the tears. Thank you, she managed. Later, when the overhead lights buzzed to life for dinner, she didn't sit at her usual spot. She walked slowly, carefully, to the table by the window. Sunlight, though weak, still reached that far. She pulled out her sketchbook and let herself be seen. By the end of the week, her drawings had shifted. Less gloom, more shape. Hints of color in her notes, red for fury, blue for restraint, green for reclaiming. Milridge didn't change. The soup was still cold, the clock still stuck at odd hours, but something inside her moved, like a thaw. She passed Louise in the hallway one morning. You seem taller, the woman said, half amused. Celeste smiled, just slightly, but it wasn't until she slipped into the supply closet to sharpen her pencil that she found the file, her file, left open on the desk. Curiosity overpowered caution. A few pages deep, she found it. Consent granted by Guardian G. Whitman for long-term placement. Psychiatric eval, unsigned. Her knees nearly buckled. So it was true. The hallway outside echoed with footsteps and muffled voices, but inside her head was the howl of betrayal. Griffin hadn't just walked her into the fire. He lit the match. That night, under her mattress, she sketched a door. Not locked, not barred, open, waiting. The rain tapped lightly on the Milridge window, soft as memory. Celeste sat on the edge of her bed, sketchbook open in her lap. Her fingers hovered above the page, pencil unmoving. She wasn't drawing the present today. Today, the past tugged too hard. She began with a pair of tightly closed lips, her mother's mouth, thin, bloodless, and always pressed in judgment. Doris Whitman had been made of rules and rosaries, the kind of woman who ironed blouses on Sundays and prayed in silence over burnt coffee. Celeste had learned to love quietly, paint secretly. As a child, she'd hide her sketch pads beneath floorboards or stuff them between mattress springs. Her bedroom was cold, always 2 shades too gray, no matter how many paper flowers she taped to the walls. She drew in whispers, faces of people she imagined, places she'd never see. One afternoon, Doris found her sketchbook. What's this? She asked, flipping through the pages with tight disgust. Is this what you do while I scrub and suffer? It's just drawing, young Celeste stammered. Just wasting time, you mean? The Lord didn't give you hands for this vanity. You want to be some starving fool. What will feed you, colors? Celeste had apologized, not for the art, but for being seen. Doris had been a widow by 31. Her husband, a quiet machinist, died in a factory accident, leaving her with 2 children and no time to mourn. Survival replaced softness. Fear hardened into control. There were no hugs in that house, only folded laundry and quiet resentment. Celeste learned early, silence kept you safe. She remembered how her mother avoided mirrors, how she never cried in front of anyone, not even at her husband's funeral. The grief twisted inward, calcified into expectation. Doris didn't demand affection. She demanded usefulness. You want love, Doris once said. Then prove you're worth it. Years later, when Celeste gave birth to Griffin, she swore to undo every stitch of that silence. The hospital room had glowed golden. Griffin was tiny, pink, and loud, and Celeste had wept openly holding him. "I'll never make you feel invisible," she whispered to him. "Never." She kept her word, at least at first. She doted. She made birthday banners by hand. Every lunch was packed with a note. Every painting he made was framed on the fridge. She touched his face constantly, told him he was special, safe, adored. But some storms start under blue skies. He was 8 the first time he pushed her away. "Stop kissing me in front of my friends," he snapped. "It's embarrassing." Celeste laughed it off. "That's okay, you're growing up." But her smile wavered. Then came 12, when his moods turned volcanic, when he began slamming doors and muttering curses just low enough not to be punished. At 14, he stopped speaking in full sentences. Answers came in shrugs, eye rolls, and biting sarcasm. She tried harder, more love, more attention, more silence about her needs. He took and took. She remembered a night. He was 17 when he came home after midnight. She'd waited up, heart pounding. "You scared me," she said gently. "You didn't answer your phone." He smirked. "Maybe I didn't want to." "Griffin." "Oh, here it comes. The guilt speech. You always do this." "I'm just worried about you." "No, you're not. You're worried I'll turn out like Dad." The words stunned her. "You think I don't know? That you walk on eggshells around me because he left? That you try so hard to be good so I won't run too?" Celeste could barely breathe. "It's not like that," she whispered. "Yes, it is. Everything's about you. You coddle me because you're scared of being alone." It wasn't true. Or maybe in some buried way it was. She tried to remember her husband's leaving without bitterness. He hadn't been cruel, just lost. One day he kissed Griffin goodbye and never came back. Left a note that said, "I need something more than this." Celeste had folded that paper 8 times and tucked it in a box with old birthday cards and pacifiers. She never told Griffin what it really said. She just said, "He left. But we'll be okay." And they were, until they weren't. The rain outside thickened. Celeste turned the page in her sketchbook and drew her childhood home. Not how it was, but how it felt. Cramped, cold, unyielding, windows too small, curtains always drawn. She drew her mother's hands next, clenched around a Bible. Then Griffin's hands smaller, open and taking. She saw the pattern, the loop. Doris had used fear to control. Celeste had used love to compensate. Both forms suffocated. Both passed down silence dressed in different clothes. Griffin had learned to weaponize guilt, to twist her sacrifices into proof of weakness, to say, "You're smothering me," when she only meant to stay close. Maybe she had been too soft. Maybe she'd been afraid to confront the darker parts of her son. But hadn't she earned the right to protect him? To give more than she ever received? Still, love without boundaries becomes erasure. She had erased herself. Nora's voice cut through the quiet. "You drawing ghosts again?" Celeste looked up. "Number portraits." Same thing. Celeste offered a faint smile. Not this time. Later that night, she drew her mother again, but differently. Doris in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, a pot of boiled cabbage on the stove. Her face not cruel, just tired, terrified. A woman who was never allowed to be soft. Celeste wrote in the margin, "She taught me survival. I tried to teach love. We both taught silence." She drew herself next. Not young, not old, midway. A woman peeling layers of herself back. Paint, mother, daughter. At the center, a face unsure of its shape. She didn't know what she was becoming yet, but she knew this. She would no longer apologize for her light. The hallway to the administrative wing was quiet, save for the distant buzz of a vacuum and the faint clatter of utensils from the kitchen. Celeste walked slowly, deliberately, gripping her sketchbook like armor. Her hands trembled, but her jaw was set. This time, she wasn't drawing. She was demanding answers. Ms. Penrose's office door bore no welcome sign, only a sterile nameplate and a brass knob that felt colder than it should. Celeste knocked once, twice. "Come in," came the voice, dry, clipped. The office was beige. Everything about Penrose was beige. Her blouse, her tightly pinned hair, her expression. "I'd like to see my intake documents," Celeste said, voice steady despite the drumbeat in her chest. Penrose glanced up from her keyboard with the smile of someone rehearsed in denial. "Mrs. Whitman, we've discussed your concerns. Your son was given legal authority for your placement. Everything was handled according to procedure." "I want to see them," Celeste pressed. "All of them." There was a pause, thin and tense. "That's not standard protocol." "Then break the protocol." Penrose's lips tightened. She rose with performative patience and crossed the room to a locked file cabinet. "This won't help your condition," she muttered. "Digging into painful events can destabilize." Celeste didn't flinch. "Please." The file. The folder was thicker than expected. Penrose placed it on the desk like a challenge. "If it reassures you," briefly. Celeste sat down. The folder opened with a rustle that sounded louder than it should have. Inside were clipped pages, medical evaluations, psychiatric notes, guardianship papers. And there it was, her signature, slanted, exaggerated, wrong. She stared at it, her breath catching. "I never signed this," she said. Penrose didn't look up. "It was submitted through proper legal channels." Celeste ran her finger along the ink. The letters curved oddly, her name almost childlike in form. Beneath it, a date, 2 weeks before her last lucid appointment with her physician. "This is forged," she whispered. "There's no evidence of that," Penrose said. "Let's not jump to conclusions. You've been under emotional stress." Celeste stood suddenly. The chair screeched backward. "Don't patronize me. I know my own handwriting." Penrose stayed calm, too calm. Emotional instability can distort memory. It's not uncommon for postmenopausal. Celeste slammed the folder shut. "I want copies," she said, "of everything." That night, she told Tina. The nurse's face paled. "He forged your signature?" she whispered. "Oh, God." "I need help," Celeste said. "Someone who knows how to fight this." Tina bit her lip, thinking. "My cousin Liam used to work in elder care investigations. Blew the whistle on some bad placements. He's stubborn." "Perfect." Liam met her 2 days later in the empty art therapy room. He was in his 40s, sharp-eyed with a notebook always in hand. As Celeste slid the copied documents across the table, Liam studied each page like a puzzle. "This is bad," he muttered. "Real bad." "It's fake, isn't it?" Liam nodded slowly. "Absolutely. Your signature isn't consistent with DMV records. And look, this doctor's assessment? The date's been altered. See the smudge near the stamp? They backdated it." Celeste's throat tightened. "So I'm not crazy." "No," Liam said. "You're just convenient." He explained how guardianship fraud was growing. Quiet, legal, and devastating. Families got access to property. Institutions got a permanent patient. Everyone got what they wanted, except the one locked inside. "Your house?" Liam asked gently. "I haven't seen it in months." He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward her. A real estate listing. Celeste's home, her home, sold 2 weeks ago. Griffin listed himself as the seller. She stared at the image, her garden ripped out, her studio labeled as bonus space. The ache was physical. "He took everything." Liam's voice softened. "You trusted him." "I raised him," she choked out. "I gave him everything." He said nothing. Back in her room, Celeste stared out the window. Her hands ached. Her face was hot. The walls felt tighter now, closer. "You okay?" Nora asked from her bed, voice unusually gentle. "No," Celeste said, "but I will be." She opened her sketchbook and started drawing, quick, jagged lines. Her hands shook, but she didn't stop. She drew a house, a signature, a sun with no eyes. Then, with pencil smudges across her palms, she wrote 3 words at the bottom of the page. "He stole me." Celeste had never seen herself as someone who planned vengeance. But then again, she'd never expected to be institutionalized under forged consent, stripped of her home, her autonomy, and her dignity. By the time she reached page 47 of Legal Recourse for Elder Abuse, her eyes burned, but she kept reading. Liam had brought her a pile of materials, case studies, legal guides, and a battered flip phone with prepaid minutes. They met in the art room every other evening just after lights out, their whispered strategy blooming like revolution in the dark. "It's fraud," Liam said. "What Griffin did falls under financial and emotional elder abuse. Guardianship misuse, property theft, forged medical consent, it's all actionable." Celeste paced as he spoke, arms crossed tight over her chest. "And what are my chances of being heard? Of being believed?" Liam leaned forward. "If you stay quiet, none. If you raise hell, considerable." For the first time in weeks, Celeste smiled, crooked, tired, but defiant. "Good. I want him to regret every signature he faked." She sketched the plan in her notebook. Each page became a blueprint. Names, dates, notarized lies. She drew Griffin's face not as a son, but as a mark. Calm exterior, hollow center. She drafted a timeline, marked every manipulation. From the Thursday visits to the misplaced medication, the whispers of concern, the sudden push into care. It wasn't protection, it was conquest. Tina slipped her messages during medication rounds, phone numbers, case examples, and eventually, Joanna Marks. "She used to be one of your students," Tina whispered, placing the folded note under Celeste's pillow. "Says she owes you." Joanna arrived 3 days later, sharp suit, hair coiled like a crown, and eyes that saw through people. Her entrance turned heads in the hallway. Staff stood a little straighter. Penrose scowled from behind her office door. "You really want to go to war with your son?" Joanna asked after the introductions, her voice low, even. Celeste didn't flinch. "He already started it. I'm just answering back." They sat across from each other in the activity room, a chessboard between them. Neither touched the pieces. "You know what they'll call you?" Joanna continued. "Bitter, delusional, mentally unfit." "I know," Celeste said. "They already do." Joanna paused, then leaned forward, her voice softening. "You gave me a voice once. You told me my anger wasn't ugly, it was honest. I became a lawyer because of that. So I'm taking this case. Pro bono." Celeste blinked hard. "Why?" Joanna smiled. "Time to return the favor." The plan grew stronger. Joanna filed motions quietly, started the paper trail. Liam reached out to journalists. Tina smuggled flash drives. In the evening, Celeste read aloud from the law books, her voice growing steadier. She practiced statements, rehearsed her story. "I'm not disposable," she whispered one night, staring into the mirror above the sink. "I'm dangerous now." She pulled her hair back, exposing the lines of her face, the battle map of years endured. For once, she didn't wish them gone. The facility began to notice. Penrose watched her with narrowed eyes. Staff meetings grew quieter when Celeste entered the room. One afternoon, she passed by the nurse's station and heard it. "She's stirring up trouble. We should have sedated her when we had the chance." She didn't stop walking. She smiled. Back in her sketchbook, she drew a lioness, older, leaner, still watching the savannah. She titled the page, "Survivor's Anatomy." Griffin called once, sensing change. "Mom, we need to talk." She answered with silence. He tried again. "I was only trying to help. You were slipping. You forged my life away," she said. "There's no conversation after that." He hung up. That night, Joanna brought her preliminary court documents. "We'll start by freezing your estate, then we move to invalidate the guardianship." "And criminal charges?" Celeste asked, voice flat. Joanna met her eyes. "If you want them." "I want everything," Celeste replied, "all of it back and his shame." Joanna nodded. "Then let's begin." The move came quietly. No announcement, no apology. One morning, Celeste's name was taped to a new door, room 318. Private, a corner unit with a view of the dying orchard behind Millridge. Tina winked as she helped roll her belongings down the hall. Consider it an early victory. The room was still sterile, white walls, faux wood floors, but the silence was hers. No snoring, no passive TV muttering, just space, air, and light. The window, wide and clean, framed the world like a canvas. She stood there for a long time, breathing. Later that afternoon, Tina smuggled in a small box. Brushes, acrylic tubes, a set of well-worn palettes wrapped in newspaper. Joanna said this might help. Celeste stared at the box like it held fire. She hadn't painted in years. Sketches were safe, quiet, controlled, but paint? Paint was freedom, messy, unpredictable, alive. She set up a corner with a plastic chair and towel-covered table. Opened her sketchbook to the drawing of her house. She remembered every inch, and she began. At first, her hands moved hesitantly, but muscle memory guided her. The strokes came, long, thin washes of slate and umber, dabs of ochre. She painted the cracked sidewalk, the dead tulips, the windows boarded from inside. In the center, the front door, closed, chained, swallowed in shadow. The image was exact. A house she knew, but never understood. A prison she thought was a home. She painted for hours, lost in it, the scent of acrylic anchoring her in a place both familiar and far. That night, she dreamt of Griffin at 17. His charm like polished glass, slick, reflective, but sharp. The way he'd smile at teachers, then mimic them cruelly behind their backs. She remembered one particular night after his debate team win. "You were incredible," she'd said, hugging him. He pulled back, smug. "Why do you always cry when I succeed?" "I'm just proud of you," she whispered. "No," he said, eyes gleaming. "It's jealousy. You hate that I'm smarter than you." The words sliced. At the time, she had laughed awkwardly, but alone in her bedroom that night, she wept. Not because he was cruel, but because he believed it. In room 318, she sat on the floor surrounded by drying canvases, her fingers smeared with burnt sienna and blue-gray. Her breath slowed as she took in the painted home, the one she no longer had. And then the grief hit. She collapsed onto the edge of the bed, shoulders shaking, face buried in her hands. It wasn't just the house. It was the betrayal, the erasure, the years she'd given, the love she'd twisted to protect a boy who had weaponized her heart. She cried harder than she had in decades, ugly, guttural sobs that had waited too long for permission. No one came to hush her. When the storm passed, she sat upright, wiped her face, looked at the painting again. "You don't get to keep me in that house," she whispered. The next morning, Joanna arrived unannounced, a thin file in her hand and fury in her jawline. "You need to hear this." Celeste sat up straighter. "Griffin didn't just sell your home. He used the proceeds to invest in a luxury condo development, 30 units uptown near the river." Celeste's lips parted. "He signed as a silent partner, used a forged power of attorney. He's made almost $500,000 in equity already." The silence in the room stretched. "$500,000, Joanna repeated more softly. Celeste stood, walked to her easel. She stared at her painting, the locked door, the ruined garden, then back to Joanna. "Then he's going to pay," she said. "Every dollar, every lie." Joanna nodded. "He will." The view from room 318 held no sunsets, but the sky was vast. The orchard beyond was still dying, but it hadn't collapsed, and neither had she. The building loomed over the skyline like a monument to betrayal. Glass, steel, pristine arrogance. 30 stories of luxury, all stamped under a single gleaming name at the main entrance. Whitman Holdings. Celeste stared at it from across the street, her hands buried in her coat pockets, the wind tugging at the hem. The letters shimmered in silver, polished daily, no doubt, as if her name hadn't been lifted from her like skin. Joanna stood beside her, scanning the building with narrowed eyes. "Penthouse," she said quietly. "Top floor, corner unit. He registered it 6 months ago under a corporate trust. It's disgusting." Celeste didn't answer. She was too busy watching the mirrored glass where the upper floors reflected nothing but clouds and sun. Somewhere up there, Griffin lived, slept, ate, smiled, used her legacy to build a kingdom she was barred from. "My name's on it," she finally said, her voice cool, precise. "But he lives in it. That ends today." Back at Millridge, the nurses whispered more now. Some stopped smiling when she passed. Penrose had taken to checking in more frequently, her tone clipped, her concern artificial. But Celeste wasn't rattled. She spent her evenings in room 318 painting. This time, not ruins, but reclamation. A woman walking away from fire, a house crumbling behind her, not in defeat, but in freedom. The next day, the legal process began. Joanna filed a civil suit in probate court. Financial exploitation, fraud, elder abuse. Accompanied by Liam's documentation, the forged signature, and a forensic handwriting analysis. They included real estate transaction trails, bank transfers, doctored evaluations. Joanna made the first media contact, a local journalist with a reputation for torching corrupt guardianship practices. "Don't worry," she told Celeste, flipping through documents. "You're not just a story, you're the storm." That night, Celeste sat by the window as rain etched lines down the glass. Nora shuffled in, holding 2 mugs of watery cocoa. "I saw you on TV," she muttered, settling into the chair beside her. Celeste raised an eyebrow. "Already?" "News moves fast when money's involved." Nora took a sip. "You look like a woman who's ready to set fire to the past." Celeste didn't smile. "It's not about revenge, it's about restoration." Nora's gaze sharpened. "Revenge always has a cost, girl. Make sure you know it." Celeste turned back to the window. "I've already paid it." 3 days later, Griffin sent a cease and desist letter. Joanna laughed when she read it. "Desperate men hire expensive lawyers to bluff with paper threats. He's running scared." Celeste opened the envelope herself. Inside, beneath the legal jargon, was a handwritten postscript in Griffin's neat, superior script. "I gave you everything. You're throwing it away, again." She stared at the words for a long time, then reached for a pen and sketched a simple image on the back. A house with its lights off, and a figure standing outside it holding the key. The first press article hit the following week. "Son accused of defrauding elderly mother for luxury real estate." Photos included a blurry headshot of Griffin from a recent gala. Below it, a side profile of Celeste walking into court, hair pulled back, face unreadable. The comment sections erupted. Some called her a liar, others a hero. But the message was out. The name Whitman now meant more than just sleek condos and river views. It meant exposure. Celeste stood before the building one last time, not as a mother, not as a victim, but as someone who refused to be erased. And this time, her name would speak for itself. The courtroom buzzed with a low, electric tension, like the air before a lightning strike. Celeste sat at the plaintiff's table, back straight, sketchbook in her lap. Her fingers gripped the binding so tightly the tips had gone pale. She had trimmed her nails the night before, but still, one had split under the pressure, and a thin crescent of blood marked her thumb. Across the room, Griffin adjusted his tie like it was choking him. His suit was immaculate, his jaw clenched, but the eyes, once charming, disarming, flickered with dread. The judge entered. Proceedings began. As Joanna opened with a searing timeline of events, Celeste's mind drifted to a different courtroom. Griffin at 12, explaining to a school counselor that he'd seen bruises on his mother's arms. The truth? She'd slipped on wet stairs while cleaning, but Griffin had framed it like fear. "I just want her safe," he'd said. Tears in his eyes he knew how to weaponize. He wasn't punished, he was praised. And Celeste had apologized to the staff, embarrassed and confused. That was the first time she realized. Griffin didn't need fists to wound. He had performance. In the courtroom now, Joanna called her first witness, Tina. She stood firm, voice steady. "I saw the intake file. The signature wasn't hers. I knew it, but when I raised questions, Ms. Penrose shut it down." "And what about the medication changes?" Joanna asked. "They were made at her son's request, without medical review." Joanna turned to the judge. The defendant orchestrated a fraudulent system of control. He stole her house, silenced her voice, and labeled her broken to make her easier to erase. Griffin's attorney objected. The judge overruled. Celeste clutched her sketchbook tighter. In her mind, another flash. Griffin, 16, charming a substitute teacher into letting him skip a test. He'd lied with ease, told the class she had cancer. She hadn't even been sick. She confronted him that night. "It was just a story," he said. "You always say art is about narrative." He'd smiled like he was proud. Joanna now circled Griffin on the stand. "You sold your mother's home while she was institutionalized." "I was trying to protect her," he said. "You moved into the penthouse with proceeds from that sale. She wasn't safe on her own. Yet you invested in a luxury property under a holding company bearing her name." Griffin's nostrils flared. "She never appreciated what I did for her. She couldn't. She ruined my life by loving me too much." A gasp rippled through the gallery. Even the stenographer paused. Joanna stepped closer. "So your defense is that her love was suffocating? That you had no choice but to fabricate evaluations, forge legal documents, and strip her of autonomy?" Griffin's mask cracked. "She needed to be controlled. And you appointed yourself warden." The silence that followed was thunderous. The judge's voice broke through like a gavel through glass. "Enough. I've heard more than enough." Celeste exhaled shakily. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath for the last 20 minutes. Her sketchbook now bore impressions, dark grooves where her pencil had dug through the pages. The judge spoke with finality. "Mr. Griffin Whitman, this court finds you liable for elder fraud, medical coercion, and fiduciary abuse. Your assets are frozen. Criminal charges will proceed separately." Celeste blinked, not in victory, in confirmation. "And," the judge continued, "the entity known as Whitman Holdings is hereby awarded to Celeste Whitman in restitution, effective immediately." Outside the courtroom, cameras flashed. Questions flew. Joanna shielded Celeste with her coat, whispering, "You did it." But Celeste said nothing. She simply walked, steady and silent, toward the waiting car. 3 weeks later, she stood again outside the glass monolith, Whitman Holdings. Only now it was hers. Her name hadn't been stolen, it had been reclaimed. Inside, new management was posted. A board was formed. Griffin's penthouse was reassigned a lease, under strict terms. A legal tenant, no equity, no title, just a contract. Nora called that night. "You let him stay?" Celeste sat by her window. "Yes." "You're better than me." "No," Celeste said softly. "I just want him to feel the walls he built." She watched the lights from the building flicker, and then she picked up her brush. Griffin stood in the lobby of what was once his empire. Gone were the golden logos and designer furniture. The walls were painted soft gray, the lighting warm but plain. A new brass plaque above the entrance read, "The Whitman Haven, a place to begin again." His name remained, but not for him. Behind the front desk, a teenager with sharp eyes and dyed silver hair handed him a clipboard. "Jules. Rules, lease terms, community service schedule," they said flatly. "You're in 30A, formerly the penthouse." Griffin stared at them. "She put you up to this?" "She runs the place now," Jules said, chewing gum. "You're just renting it." The elevator ride up was quiet. The apartment was stripped bare, modern finishes dulled, art removed. It felt temporary, a holding cell with a view. He opened a cabinet and found it empty. No wine, no control. Celeste arrived later that day. She didn't knock, she entered like a landlord. "You redecorated," Griffin muttered. "I removed the lies," she replied. He leaned against the counter, eyes sharp. "I always knew you had it in you, ruthless, quiet about it." Celeste looked at him evenly. "Number I learned from the best. You." She handed him a list. "Rent is non-negotiable. Service hours begin Thursday. Rooftop garden under Irene. No direct communication with me unless requested in writing." He scoffed. "You think this makes us even?" "This isn't revenge, Griffin," she said. "It's boundaries. You've never had them." Griffin looked around. "And this building of yours? A shrine?" She shook her head. "A refuge, for people like me, people you tried to silence." Downstairs, Irene was pruning basil on the rooftop garden. She moved slowly, deliberately, a veteran of both war and widowhood. She'd told Celeste once, "Grief is a second skin, you just learn how to wear it better." Carl, once a literature teacher with a tremor in his hands, ran the book exchange by the elevator. He welcomed each tenant like an old friend. No one ever felt like a stranger near Carl. Jules handled logistics, tech repairs, deliveries, inventory. Celeste never asked about their past. They told her once, "I ran away from being erased." She simply nodded and replied, "Then you'll be seen here." That night, Griffin walked the halls of the building he once owned, seeing rooms filled with life he didn't understand. A chess game in progress in the lounge, laughter from the kitchen, murals in progress on the basement wall. He passed the office door. Celeste sat behind the desk, paperwork before her, glasses perched on her nose. She didn't look up. The next day, he began his shift in the garden. Irene handed him gloves and pointed without a word. The dirt under his nails felt unfamiliar. Honest, uncomfortable. Later, he cornered Celeste by the mailroom. "Is this what you wanted? Me in exile?" She met his eyes. Number I wanted peace. You made exile necessary. You think you're a saint now? She stepped closer. Number, you think I'm someone who finally stopped begging to be believed. He said nothing. That evening, she painted again. A building wrapped in ivy. Windows wide open except for one. Locked, dark, untouched. It faced north, toward the penthouse. The Whitman Haven was no longer just a building. It breathed now, light streaming through uncovered windows. The hum of laughter rising from the stairwells, and the scent of rosemary and fresh bread drifting from the communal kitchen. Celeste stood on the third-floor landing watching as tenants passed beneath her. They nodded, smiled, waved. "Morning, Ms. Witt," Carl called, balancing a stack of books. She smiled. It wasn't just a title, it was belonging. On Wednesdays, Celeste hosted painting classes in the converted activity room. Irene painted quiet landscapes, fields of gold, always empty of figures. Carl's brush trembled, but his color sense remained vivid. Jules preferred charcoal, sketching sharp, shadowed scenes that softened the longer you looked. No critiques, Celeste reminded everyone, only invitations. In the evening, she gathered them in the common lounge, hot tea, worn quilts, and stories that unfolded like whispered prayers. War memories, love lost, second chances. Jules once admitted they didn't remember their last birthday, but knew they'd never felt as seen as they did now. "You're the first adult who didn't try to fix me," they said to Celeste one night. "You just see me." Celeste's chest tightened. That's enough sometimes. Thanksgiving arrived with mismatched chairs and a long folding table crammed with everything from Irene's cranberry stuffing to Jules's boxed mac and cheese. Carl recited a poem. Tina brought her baby niece. Someone played a broken piano slightly off-key. When the group toasted, they raised their glasses to Ms. White. She blinked back tears. In her room, Celeste painted long after midnight. Not from memory now, but from feeling. Her latest piece showed a large, open hand. From it bloomed vines, small homes, and windows that glowed like lanterns in the dark. She signed it simply, C. Whitman. Her inner voice, no longer desperate for validation, murmured truth. "I was never just a mother. I was always a world." The letter came in a plain envelope, no return address. She opened it slowly, expecting another notice, another challenge. Instead, it was a diagnosis report. Griffin Whitman, early onset Parkinson's. Confirmed, stage 1. No letter, no note, just data. For a long time, Celeste sat still, the paper fluttering in her lap. The sounds of life drifted in through her window. Jules laughing, the elevator dinging, pots clinking in the kitchen. She didn't cry. She simply folded the page, placed it in a drawer, and returned to the easel. There were still things to build, still stories to paint, and a family she chose, one that had chosen her back. The room was beige, cold, and smelled faintly of antiseptic and disuse. A folded blanket sat at the edge of the recliner. The blinds were drawn. One stiff chair stood near the bed, cheap plastic bolted to the floor. Celeste sat in it. Griffin was smaller than she remembered, not in body, though he'd lost weight, but in presence. His hands trembled subtly in his lap. His jaw, once sharp, now twitched between expressions that didn't finish forming. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a threadbare version of what it once was. "So," he said, "you came." Celeste didn't answer right away. She watched the light on the wall shift as the afternoon sun fought its way in through the blinds. You asked for me. Griffin gave a weak, bitter smile. No one else would come. Silence stretched between them. She didn't fill it. He looked at her, eyes dull but searching. Do you hate me? She exhaled slowly. No. He blinked, surprised. But I won't save you either. The words hung in the air, sharp, clean, final. Griffin looked down. His hands twitched. I thought maybe you'd, after all this time. I grieved you long before the courts did, Celeste said, her voice even. I buried what I hoped you were. I mourned what I let myself believe, and I carry the guilt of that every day. He didn't argue. For once, she continued. You didn't just steal my house. You rewrote my life. You told the world I was broken, and when I screamed, you called it hysteria. You did what men have done to women like me for centuries. Quietly, with paperwork. Griffin swallowed. I thought I was protecting you. No, she said, eyes hard. You thought I was inconvenient. You wanted my silence to be your comfort. His face crumpled slightly, a real crack. I don't even know why I did it anymore, he muttered. I was so angry all the time, like everything you gave me wasn't enough. Celeste stood, slowly. You were angry because I loved you without condition, and you didn't know what to do with that. He looked up at her, raw now. What do I do with what's left? She considered him. You sit in it, you own it. You live with what you built. I'm sick, he said, voice hoarse. You know that now. I do. And that doesn't change anything for you? She shook her head. It changes everything. And still, nothing. He broke then, not with screams, but with something worse. Honest weeping, shoulders shaking, face buried in his hands, a sound like surrender. Celeste didn't move, didn't comfort. She watched him cry, and for the first time felt nothing she couldn't carry. No joy, no hatred, just space. She reached into her coat pocket and placed something on the table beside him. A folded piece of paper, a sketch of a locked door with a broken chain. You're free to find peace, she said, but you'll find it without me. As she walked away, the light through the doorway spilled into the room behind her. Golden, unashamed. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The rooftop garden of the Whitman Haven breathed with early morning stillness. Dew clung to the edges of basil leaves. The sky, a soft gradient of violet and rose, stretched above the city like an exhale. Celeste stood alone near the railing, arms crossed against the gentle breeze, watching the sun begin its slow climb above the skyline. Behind her, the building murmured to life. Footsteps, clinking cups, the shuffle of slippers against tile. She didn't turn, not yet. This was her ritual. Every morning since the court ruling, since the confrontation, since she returned not as Griffin's shadow, but as Celeste Whitman, founder of the Whitman Haven. Below her, the windows reflected light, each square a story, each tenant a pulse. Her fingers curled slightly, not in tension, but in gratitude. She'd survived something most couldn't name. Not just institutionalization, not just betrayal, erasure, and she had painted her way out. She closed her eyes and began to speak, softly, as if to the dawn itself. He sent me away without a goodbye, she murmured. I answered with a life he can never touch. Her voice did not tremble. There was no bitterness in it, only truth. I thought I would die forgotten, not just in a home, but inside myself. I thought my art, my voice, even my motherhood had withered. I thought I was too late. A pause, then a faint smile. But I was always on time. My story didn't end when he locked that door. It began when I opened another. Behind her, laughter trickled up the stairwell. The tenants were gathering, paint cans were rattling. Today was mural day. They decided weeks ago to paint the wall that faced the street. A mosaic of their lives, fragments stitched together in bold strokes. A teenager's first poem, a veteran's childhood memory, a teacher's favorite quote. It was Jules who'd organized it. They'd printed the blueprint on grid paper, passed out rolls, assigned pallets. Celeste descended the stairs and joined them. Carl was painting a row of bookshelves, each title his favorite from decades past. Irene painted a pair of boots in the sand, her late husband's. Jules sketched an open door with shadows fleeing behind it. Celeste watched, then picked up a brush. At first she hesitated, years of hesitation still echoing in her joints, but then the motion came back, gentle but sure. She painted a woman, not young, not flawless, but free, unbound hair, open arms, feet grounded, eyes open, not waiting, arriving. The final brushstroke curved at the edge of her figure, an embrace not seeking anything, but offering everything. Around her, the mural bloomed. Pain and joy side by side, shared pasts in vibrant color. She stepped back, wiped her hands, and met Jules' gaze. "She's you," they said softly. "She's all of us," Celeste replied. That night, she sat alone in her room, watching the mural through the window. The lights cast it in amber. The building felt alive. Her mind wandered, not to Griffin, not to pain, but to herself. The girl who used to draw in secret, the mother who tried to love too much, the woman who walked into court with blood under her nails and truth in her bones. She had been all of them. Now she was whole, not a weapon, not a witness, not a wound, just a woman finally at peace, and that was enough. If Celeste's story stirred something in you, rage, recognition, resilience, don't let it end here. Speak up for the silenced. Share this with someone who's been underestimated, dismissed, or erased. Because sometimes, the quietest voices carry the fiercest storms, and every story reclaimed makes it harder for the next one to be stolen.